He could be dead, or captured by a gang of outlaws, who knows? Uncle Rabi paused and looked around his audience with fire in his eyes. The flames from the campfire made his dark eyes burn with even more intensity than normal. And normal for Uncle Rabi was already on a scale from captivating to outright intimidating. Yet, rumor goes, he's still alive. His cancer may not give him a lot more time, and no one so far has got through to the civilized world from the wasteland of bandits. But, my friends, that gripping gaze around the group again, never underestimate a man like Mr. Thomas Wallace. Never underestimate a man with determination. Uncle Rabi was the best storyteller in the state. Perhaps even in the whole of the United States of the Sunrise, the USSR. But as a Niger citizen, Uncle Rabi was one of them. They had the first right of offer on his performances. Or so they like to think. More likely was that he preferred Nigerian jobs because they were paid best. After all, Niger was the richest state in the world. Damilola stared at the man with her jaw dropped and her hand resting on Bob's head. Bob was the family dog lying at her feet. He had been raising one of his eyebrows whenever he wasn't asleep, as if he was as enthralled by the tale as Damilola was. It wasn't the first time she saw Uncle Rabi in a live performance, far from it. Being the only daughter of one of Niger's most powerful businessmen, she had been to more Rabi tales than any other 15-year-old. But this was his best story yet. Uncle Rabi stood up from his cross-legged position and bowed graciously in response to the spirited applause from the people around the campfire. The tumult snapped Dami out of her beguilement. She wasn't ready to let him go. "Uncle Rabi," she said, "Uncle Rabi, tell us more. Is it really for sale time?" An iron hand gripped her shoulder. "Have you lost your mind?" Her father hissed from behind her. "No one speaks like that to Uncle Rabi. No one. We treat the most celebrated performer in the most esteemed art form of the USSR with respect. Not as if he were your real uncle. Don't you forget it." Hey. Dan, who sat on Dami's right, said with a grin, "Your real uncle deserves at least as much respect." He nudged the girl in her side and winked. Dami laughed. Dan was her real uncle, and he always made her laugh. Even when she was reprimanded by her father at the same time. Dan was supposed to be at the event with Julia, his wife, but she was sick. She was often sick, and Dami missed her. Julia had filled the void that her mom had left when she died in a traffic accident. But now, Julia was in a hospital bed instead of here, with her, where she should have been. While the rest of the premium-paying audience got up in a standing ovation without paying much attention to Dami's insolent call, Uncle Rabi locked eyes with her. He beckoned her over when the applause died out and people began to leave. "Oh my good gracious, Coach," her father said in horror. "There you have it, summoned by the master himself. What did I do wrong in raising you, child?" Dan scoffed. "Don't you worry, Dami. You're lucky to get to speak with Uncle Rabi. Try to get his autograph, will you?" Her dad scowled at his brother, but his hand softened on Dami's shoulder and squeezed gently while he pressed a kiss on her forehead. Dami rolled her eyes, like a teenager should. She made her way over to the King of Tales. "Hello, young lady," he said. His voice was warm and friendly. Dami shook his hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Uncle Rabi." She dropped her gaze to the ground, more impressed by the man's presence and her father's words than she wanted. Likewise, my lady, likewise. I couldn't help but hear your question. I'm sorry, Uncle Rabi, for my bad manners. I shouldn't have... It's not about manners, girl, he interrupted her in a sharper tone. It's about recklessness. It won't happen again, I promise. I know you deserve more respect. Please, forgive me. Uncle Rabi gaped at her as if she had told him he looked like a unicorn. Respect, he finally said, with a warmth back in his eyes. I couldn't care less about respect, but I care about your safety. My safety? Sit down. This is important. She did as she was told. Uncle Rabi squatted down in front of her. She saw the light from the fire danced on one side of his face. His deep brown skin almost seemed to come to life. He said, What you just heard was a story. A story with real-life elements, perhaps, but a story nonetheless. And it wasn't a story with a happy end now, was it? I guess not. Don't guess, child, it was an awful ending. This man ended up in the terror territories. There is no worse place on earth. But he's preparing his revenge, his comeback. You said it yourself. Uncle Rabi shook his head. I'm a storyteller. Sometimes I have to make up a more hopeful ending than what reality provides. Because in reality, this Thomas Wallace, despite all his bravery, is probably dead. You know why? Because of Christian? No, child. Because he claimed there is such a thing as time for sale. Even if he had spoken the truth, he was doomed to be convicted. The concept of time available for purchase is too contentious, and they've banished people for such claims before. It's classed as a conspiracy theory. We all know what conspiracy theories can lead to. Dami nodded. World War III, she mumbled. That's right, my lady. No one wants to see the horrors of World War III repeated. That's why the International Conspiracy Court is so ruthless in their rulings. That's why suspects of spreading misinformation are guilty unless proven innocent in their judicature. But what if it's true? Uncle Rabi squinted and lowered his voice to a resonance as inescapable as the hissing of a nuclear missile in the air. If it's true, you still don't speak about it. You just did, was a thought Dami didn't dare to utter. As if he read her mind, and it wouldn't have surprised her if he did, he said, Something as controversial as time for sale can only be mentioned if it's referred to as a conspiracy theory, or if it's part of a story, like my tale. But for that, my dear girl, you must master the art of prudent story shaping and a lot of practice. So listen to me carefully. As if there were any other way to listen to Uncle Rabi. Forget about this time scheme as a potential reality. Do not ask people about it. Do not speak about it. If you do any of these things, you put yourself in grave danger. Dami glanced at Bob and knew she couldn't let this go. But she nodded anyway. I need to hear you say it, Uncle Rabi demanded. She looked at him with her most innocent gaze and said, I won't, Uncle Rabi. Promise. Promise? She regretted it the moment she said it. Lying wasn't her habit. She walked back to her uncle, her father, and Bob. For a moment she contemplated going back and asking for the autograph Dan wanted, but it wouldn't be proper. She embraced the dog as if they'd been apart for months. What did he say? Her dad asked anxiously. Dami only grunted in response while she laid down on the ground and kissed Bob's nose. The dog looked like he was sleeping, his chest heaving in cumbersome breaths. But with every kiss from Dami, he tried to open at least one of his eyes, and his tail brushed the dusty ground in a near imperceptible wag. "Dami," her dad insisted. "It was nothing, Dad," she said curtly. "The same old respect bullshit as what you were going on about. Good coach." She had to spend the next 2 days in her room. It wasn't too bad a punishment, considering the size of the room, the excellent help from the house servants in bringing her everything she needed, the company of Bob, even her dad knew better than to take them apart, and, perhaps most importantly, unrestricted access to all parts of the cyberspace, even the shrouded part.